Hello everyone, so I'd like to take you through the use of the app Reality Composer, which is an augmented reality app for iPad that comes from Apple, in order to do simple projects such as digital storytelling through scene creation. So I'm going to take you through the platform itself, an explanation of what some of the features are that you might choose to use with students, and then talk to you about how to bring your creations from other applications into Reality Composer. So when you first open the app, all your previous projects that you have done with Reality Composer will appear here. Otherwise, we can go to the plus. And the plus is going to create a new project for us. And the first thing we need to do is identify an anchor. Now, if you think about an augmented reality experience, it's basically bringing something to life in the real world through an augmentation of what you're seeing on the iPad. And there's different ways that you can do this. You can either have your experience be a horizontal for a tabletop or floor experience. These are the most common, I would say, for education. You can have vertical ones that attach to something that might be on a wall, such as an anchor chart or a poster or a display. You've got other options such as attaching an experience to an image, like a poster or a book. You've got face. Now, if you're familiar with things such as like Snapchat filters or Instagram filters, this sort of uses the same technology, but it does require you to have what's known as a true depth camera. So the cameras or devices that would have Face ID would work for this. So this is not going to be a common one used with education. And then an object. So say you have a particular item that you want to attach an experience to, you could do that with the object. And this is the same or similar technology to the items such as a merge cube. But for this experience, I'm going to take you through the most common, which is the horizontal. Now, when you open up a new horizontal project in Reality Composer, automatically you're going to get a cube and a text box. And these are separate items. So if you do not want them, you have to tap and then delete. Tap and delete. Okay, and this leaves you with your grid space. Now, for those who have not worked too much with augmented reality and definitely Reality Composer before, it takes a bit of orienting yourself with the platform. And so for understanding it, you're working on an X, a Y, and a Z axis. That means you're going to be moving in 3 different directions based on what you want to do in your experience. Now, we do have a toolbar at the top. I'm just going to go through the ones that are most commonly going to be used. Your plus is where you can bring in your content from the content library. There's a whole range of different categories, from basic shapes, you've got text, you've got arrows, you've got signs and call outs and charts. And then we start to go into your activities. And each of these different categories will require you to download them ahead of time. So you can see I've already got all of my library in the content library downloaded, so I can pull any of these items at any time. But it's important to know that if you are designing a Reality Composer experience and you're going to be sharing that exact experience to students, with any content that you see here, the students on their devices must have the content downloaded as well. Otherwise, when they open your experience and say, for example, you've got a bagel on a plate, if they did not have this downloaded on their iPad, this item would come through with an error. And they'd have to download it in order to then be able to see it. So it's just some of the things to keep in the back of your mind when building a Reality Composer experience, is that any of the content from Reality Composer, the end user needs to have it downloaded as well. So there you can see it's asking me to finish downloading the locations, some of which have just been added recently and I have not done so. Okay, but you've got a whole range of things that you can choose from, some that are going to be helpful, some that maybe aren't as helpful depending on what you end up teaching. But for this point, what we'll just do is go ahead and bring in a cube shape. So there we can see the cube as it would appear sitting on a table. Now, there are a few things that I can do with the content that I bring in. So once it's selected, you can see some rings have formed around it. Now, the rings are going to tell me how I can move and resize this object. So the green allows me to move it on the Z up and down, the red on the X, and the blue on the Y. Okay, so it's important to remember that you can use these tools to move your different objects around. You've also got the rings, and the rings allow you to easily just expand the size of one of those items, depending on which way you want it to be expanded. But do note that if you do make an object bigger, it might actually go through what your tabletop or flat surface would be. So it's important then to remember to bring your items so that it is sitting on the surface. Okay, so we've got our cube there. Now we can make further adjustments to this by coming up to this option here. Now while it's selected, you have the ability to transform the object, which is the type of thing that we've just been doing, moving it around, adjusting the size and so on. You can also scale it with this tool if you'd rather, just depending on your preference. I'm just going to make sure that's sitting down again. Okay. Then you've got different materials. Now the materials are going to affect how that item's going to look. So you can have it be a matte paint, you can have it look a bit more plastic, car paint, aluminum, brass, bronze, gold, steel, and all of these are really more of design features depending on the look that you're going for. If you've got the glossy paint option, you can then come in and you can choose a variety of colors here. So I'll just put that as a nice teal color. Also under look, you can then start to manipulate your shape. So because this is a cube, I can actually change it and make it into something that's like a column, if I'd like, or I can make it almost like a wall if I'm going to be building something, or I can change the depth. You know, maybe I'm going to make a swimming pool, maybe I'm going to make it like a thinner wall there. And then the bevel radius is the size, so how curved we want it to be, if we want a wall shape, if we really want it to be quite rounded. The physics I don't think are going to be too much of what you're going to be exploring about, because that's how you're going to be making different objects interact with each other. And for the purposes of storytelling, you don't really need to do much with that. So we're really just going to be looking at transforming and the look of the different items that you've put in here. So I'm quite happy with how that's turned out to start with. So other things that we can do with our content library is that we can bring in some text. And so text is going to appear just like an object would, that we can move it around, that we can manipulate it, going back to that option again. And so for this, I'm just going to put hello. I can change the font based on what is already set up in here. There's quite a few to choose from. I'm just going to go with something quite simple. And then the style, if you want to, if it has the option to be bold or not. The alignment, so where it would end up being. Okay. And then we can see it's now adjusted itself. Okay. Now under look, I can make it a bit thicker. And so that way I could push it inside another object. So now I've got this little greeting here. Okay. I can also adjust the color. So if I want to have something a bit different, I think that's quite nice. Okay. And just thinking as well, you could have this be almost like a sight word hunt for students, that you could set either sight words or vocabulary words hidden around in the space. Students could screen record as they move with their iPad, and as they approach each of the words, they have to record not only the word that they're looking at, but their voice saying what the word is. Now, other things in our content library, I mean, obviously we've got arrows, we've got call outs, so we can have speech bubbles for different characters, but we've also got the option to import. Now, import is where you're going to be bringing in any 3D content that you have made in other applications or that you've downloaded elsewhere in something such as Tinkercad, which I'll show you in just a moment. But this is the way that you would bring that content in. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to have a look at what I've got available in my collection. Let's see, find something very simple, an Easter egg. So I can see this Easter egg here. And now I've got that 3D object that I can do what I want with. I'm just going to go ahead and sit that right on top there. Okay. Right, so other things that we can do. We can attach what's known as behaviors. Now, behaviors are little animations that can enhance your scene when someone is looking at it through Reality Composer and they have pressed the play button. So we're going to take a look at this little egg and attaching a behavior. So your behaviors are this option here. We want to add a new behavior. Now there's some preset ones, such as tapping an object when we press play and it will do a flip, tapping an object and hearing a sound, tapping and doing something with force, which is using the physics, having an object that starts hidden, having an object show itself after 2 seconds, when you get close to an object with the iPad camera, that it will jiggle when in AR, or custom. Now, custom are the ones that I tend to go towards because there are specific things that I want my objects to be able to do, which are not the preset ones. So I'm going to go to custom, and I need a trigger. Now, the trigger is either when a scene starts and I've pressed play, that the action will start right away. It could be when I tap on an object, which is a common one, so that you don't have lots of behaviors going at the same time. Proximity to camera, so when you get within a certain distance towards an object, you can tap on proximity to camera and that will then activate the action. Collide uses the physics, so when two objects collide with each other. Or notification, which is much more to do with coding. So I'm going to stick with tap. And then I have to choose an object. So I want to make sure that I've got the egg selected. Okay, yep, that's good. And it says it's selected one object. And then I need an action sequence. So when I press play and I tap on the egg, what is that egg going to do? You have a whole range of different things to choose from. You can have it emphasize, which is when it does something to draw your attention to it. It can show itself, it can hide itself. You can have it move, rotate, and scale to, or move, rotate, and scale by. Adding a force, having it orbit, having it spin, changing scene, which is a little bit more complicated, so I wouldn't worry too much about that at this point. Playing sound, so if you're quite the dab hand at GarageBand or using things like voice notes, you can have sounds be brought in, so when an object is tapped, it can play a sound. Playing ambience, so a sound that's going to be playing over and over again in the background, or playing music or sound effects. Waiting, having an animation that's been made as a USDZ file. Look at camera or notify again with Xcode. So I think for the most part, we're going to be sticking around near where the top is. So for this one, I'm just going to go ahead and click emphasize. And again, I've made sure that the object is selected. You can check the duration. I'm going to push this up for about 5 seconds. And then we get to choose, well, what is that egg going to do when I press play and I tap on it? So it can pop. It can blink. It can bounce. That's quite fun. It can flip. And again, it is doing this animation based on the duration that I've asked it to do. It can float. It can jiggle. That's quite fun as well. It can pulse. Or it can spin. And again, it will go for the length of time that we've indicated. Now, further on from those, I'm going to keep that as a spin. We can then choose the style. And the style is the way that that animation is going to behave when it's activated. So at the moment, all those options that you just saw were on a basic, but you can have them be set as playful. So what would a playful spin look like? Or a wild spin. And so really, these are just different ways of being able to enhance the objects that you bring into your scene. And these behaviors can be attached to just about anything that you bring in to Reality Composer. So I'm just going to pause for a second and open up a Keynote file to show you how you would go about bringing content from Keynote into Reality Composer. So I've gone ahead and opened up Keynote, and I tend to like to work with a blank white or basic white presentation because I equate it to starting with a blank sheet of paper in my mind. If I have color or other backgrounds or patterns involved with my presentation in Keynote, it can sometimes detract from what it is I'm trying to create. So I tend to start with just a basic white. Automatically, I want to get rid of all of the text boxes. And then what I'm going to do is start to create different items that I could easily drag and drop into Reality Composer. So the first thing I want to do is go ahead and grab a clip art shape. I'm going to pick this person. Okay, quite happy with that. Now, when I have my clip art set, if I need to make any changes, such as the fill, okay, I'm going to go ahead and set that and then put a border on it. I want it to be exactly the way it needs to be before I put it into Reality Composer. And the reason is once I do that, I can't then make any changes. What it will do is it will take this piece of clip art as I've made it, and it will put it into Reality Composer almost like an image. And once it's in the image form, I can't then make changes to it. Now, as you might know, working with iPad, there are some applications that you can use that work in a split screen format. Reality Composer does not allow it, as do most AR files. They won't allow you to be able to have split screen with the AR program open on one side and your other program open on the other side. But what it can do is do a hover. So if I go into Reality Composer now, there's our scene that we were working on. I'm just going to zoom out so we have a bit of space. If I do a slow swipe from the bottom, drag my Keynote, and just let it hover on the side, I then can have both of those programs open simultaneously. So I'm going to grab onto my clip art, and again, you could have picked anything that you like for your story that you're going to tell or your scene that you're going to create. And I'm just going to grab it and drag it over. And while it's there, you can see there's a green plus, and you can see Reality Composer has the target. It is recognizing that there's something there to be brought in, and I just release. Now I need to close Keynote, and now I have my clip art shape that I can go ahead and start to work with. And again, I'm going to have to use some of the rotations to get it to stand up the way I need it to be. And obviously this is much bigger than I need it to be, so I'm going to shrink it down. And now you can see there is that piece of clip art. And use the grid to your advantage. Whenever you're moving an item, you can run it along the different axes so that you can see exactly where it is in proximity to any other item that you're working with. Okay, so I can lower this down a bit. And right there, it is noticing that I'm interacting with another item that's already there. So it has clicked under my finger of going, oh, okay, you've got something there. I've recognized that. Let me let you know that you're in alignment with it. I can move that over. And then just rotating, I can see that I need to make a slight adjustment so it's a bit more in the middle. And so there we have a piece of clip art sitting right on top of our item there. And so now that you know that you can use clip art, even if you're not a strong drawer or creator, you can use those tools, embellish them how you want in Keynote, and then bring them into Reality Composer. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go back into Keynote, and I'm just going to show you another step. Maybe you want to have a piece of dialogue in there demonstrating a conversation between two characters. And so what we can do is go back into our clip art. We're going to have this item here. Adjust it how you would like. Going to format it, just make it white and have borders so I can see the edge. Now here's a trick. If most of you, I would imagine, would know that you can already type into any bit of clip art. just realized that's gone through. Different color. There we go. Hello, my name is Samantha. Now, when you've done that, that means that your text and your clip art are connected. But if you, for some reason, want to have text on top of another item, if you're not typing directly into clip art and you just want to be able to layer things, bringing them into Reality Composer is a bit tricky. So if I just do a text box here, okay, on its own, this little piece of text, this text box, I cannot drag and drop it into Reality Composer. It won't recognize this on its own. What it must do is be attached to a photograph, or it must be attached to a drawing, or it must be attached to a piece of clip art, but it cannot be brought in on its own. So either type directly into the clip art as you want, or format your text box however you'd like it, and then use the group feature in Keynote. And that way, it's now attached to that piece of clip art, but it's also then formatted the way I might have wanted it to be. So if you'd like to have almost like maybe a journal entry, how a character might write it, rather than it being structured and formatted within this clip art by typing into it, I can then just attach my text box in. So we're going to do that same process again. Open Reality Composer, have Keynote hover on the side, select it, drag and drop. And it's that simple. And so now I can come in, I can definitely resize it, rotate it, and then move it where I want it to be. So I like it back just a little bit more. Okay, and you can see now with the implementation of two-dimensional objects, which are probably more familiar to us as teachers than the three-dimensional, you could easily start to build a scene for your students to explore and interact with. You can bring in memojis and have students create characters, or you can set up a scene ahead of time and then be able to share that to your students. And so really we're laying the groundwork of how a scene could potentially look. So I'm going to pause now. I'm going to open up a sample that I have made earlier for you to have a look at. So here we have a sample that I have made called Color My World. And the idea is that all of the two-dimensional items that you see in this scene are either clip art that was combined together to make a particular shape in Keynote, or it was hand-drawn, and those hand-drawn images were then brought in. And the idea with this scene is that it's a setting of a story that the students then have to tell. So they can use this particular scene, they can launch it in AR, have an explore about the world, and then try and come up with a story to tell what would be happening. So why do these characters live in a world that has no color? What might be happening in this particular situation? What might be the name of their world that they live in, or their town that they live in? How can a student maybe take it further? What could they add to this scene if you gave it to them just as a starting point? What more could they put into it if you just gave it as the bare minimum? So I will go ahead and launch this now in AR so you can have a look at what it would look like. And if we're doing that, all we have to do on our end is just tap on the AR button here. And so now we have our scene. And just with clever camera angles of screen recording, students can easily do a different element of digital storytelling, doing all through the video, with AR being the place to set the scene. I hope that this has been a helpful sort of tutorial and guide on how to get started with Reality Composer, the potential that is there for students. and then how to go about combining the built-in tools such as Keynote and the screen recording feature with Reality Composer for digital storytelling so that you can make use of the 2D just as much as 3D.